Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and here I am in front of the statue of Sir Robert Peel in Parliament Square. So why does Robert Peel merit a statue, in the opinion of many? Well, he was Prime Minister for a few years in the 1830s, and he also founded the police. There have been police around in some form in France and Germany for centuries, or even in ancient Rome. But in the United Kingdom, the first regular police force was founded by him when he was Home Secretary shortly after the Napoleonic Wars. So police officers were known as Peelers sometimes because of Peel's surname, or Bobbies, as in Bobby Peel. Well, what more about Sir Robert Peel? He came from the Midlands of England. Distant ancestors of his had lived on the Isle of Man, and that's where their surname Peel came from. So his family was fairly prominent in business and industry, owned a little bit of land there, and he went to Harrow School and then to Christ Church, Oxford. Christ Church being one of the colleges of Oxford University and the grandest of all, especially in those days. So his family wasn't really aristocratic in background. I suppose they'd been accepted as part of the landed gentry. They were certainly very well off. He was elected to Parliament at a very young age. He represented Cashel in Ireland, that's in County Tipperary, though he very rarely went there. Remember, these were the days when very few people had the vote. Only men who owned substantial property were permitted the right to vote. Later on he represented Tamworth. They're Tamworth pigs, but he was representing the constituency in Staffordshire, not the swine. So he was a Tory, and he held various high offices, including Home Secretary. He was Chief Secretary for Ireland for a while. Some lambasted him as Orange Peel, thinking he was too sympathetic to the Orange Order, but that is a travesty. Now, prior to the police being set up throughout the United Kingdom, there was the Irish Peace Preservation Force, which was a precursor of the police, which was founded at the instigation of Peel. So what were the pressing issues at the time? It would have been, for instance, Catholic emancipation. The Catholic Association in Ireland, led by Daniel O'Connell, was agitating for the Catholic majority to have the same rights as the Protestant minority. Now, O'Connell was not a pacifist, but was against revolution. He'd been in France at the time of the French Revolution and was horrified by the turmoil that revolution could unleash. But there were other people who did want to use force to achieve this. The Act of Union was not long before. O'Connell vowed that if he was given Catholic emancipation, then he would not be demanding any further changes. So Peel had been against Catholic emancipation for a long time. He said the United Kingdom is a Protestant country, must maintain Protestant paramountcy, and so on. And the Protestant minority in Ireland were beleaguered, and if the Catholic majority gained mastery, that would spell doom for the Church of Ireland, which is the Protestant one. Anyway, the situation was so tense, it seemed that Ireland was close to insurrection, that in April 1829, he and the Duke of Wellington, was the Prime Minister at the time, agreed that Catholic emancipation should go through. So that April, it was quickly passed. But O'Connell moved on to his next demand, which was the repeal of the Act of Union, for Ireland to have a parliament back, and then we would have a semi-detached relationship from Great Britain. But I'll move on. So then there was the Great Reform Act. So Peel privately realised it was necessary and logical that they must extend the franchise to more than, say, 5% of men, and must make it more regular because the constituencies were wildly irregular in population and territory. The constitution had to be reformulated on a more rational basis. However, he felt the Tory ultras would consider him to be an utter turncoat. Therefore, he actually voted against the Great Reform Act of 1832. And the Whigs were in office. There were some years in the wilderness till finally he managed to come back. But then one of the pressing issues became repeal of the Corn Laws. The Anti-Corn Law League under Richard Cobden and John Bright, many Whigs, radicals, the Home Rule Association in Ireland, the Repeal Association under O'Connell, were all demanding that there no longer be this import tax on corn. It was keeping the price of corn, and therefore bread, artificially high, and a loaf as a staff of life. And so he had gradually reduced it so that getting rid of it didn't make that much of a difference. But when he said that we need to do this, then a lot of Tories said that they were aghast at this and turned against him. Gladstone the rising over the Stern Unbending Tories, had been one of his disciples, and he had been Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he concurred that it was needful to be done with the Corn Laws. That was a temporary measure for after the Napoleonic Wars. So many people regarded Peel as an utter traitor, and that was the fall of Peel. So 1846, a Whig government was ushered in under Earl Russell. They were later to become Liberals. So Peel, he died in 1850. His horse was going along Constitutional Hill when it reared and he was thrown onto the pommel. Much the same way that William Rufus had died not William Rufus. William the Conqueror had died in 1090, if memory serves. That's Sir Robert Peel. General Peel, his son, and a few of other sons went into politics, but none of them achieved quite the stature of Sir Robert Peel, who stands there behind us. He was certainly a stellar intellect, and when he did finals in Oxford, many people here came to see him holding forth, because public examinations then really were public, as in people could watch them, and the examinations in his day were spoken, not written. So his viva voce, his living voice, when he was interviewed on classics and mathematics and so on, all in Latin, of course. And he got a star at first. The classification system for degrees had just been introduced. So that is Sir Robert Peel. His Tamworth Manifesto was one of the first statements of Tory policy, and the Conservative Party really started under him. His Irish confrère, John Wilson Croker, helped to establish the Conservative Party. It was Wilson the one who wrote, "There is emerging in this country a Conservative Party" in 1828, and that's the first mention of the words Conservative Party. He helped to establish the Carlton Club as a watering hole for Conservative members of Parliament and peers, and that helped instill some sort of discipline and sense of identity into the emerging Conservative Party. So to begin with, he was a Tory. By the end of his time, there were such things as Conservatives officially existed.